It appears that California Governor Gavin Newsom is going to be keeping his job. At least that's what CBS News is projecting right now. CBS News projects that the recall effort against him has failed. Although early returns showed majority of voters oppose the effort to unseat Newsom, the final count could take days to complete due to the high number of mail-in ballots. Newsom's victory is a disappointment for recall proponents, including Republican challenger Larry Elder, who suggested unfounded claims of voter fraud leading up to the election. So we want to talk a little bit more about this, and so we're going to bring in Major Garrett for a bit of analysis. Major, so, much has been made about how important this recall effort was, not just for California, but beyond California, and it's something that the president brought up. Can you just talk about what this means, this projected victory means for the Democratic Party nationally?
Well, Democrats believe that California was a test case of a couple of propositions that they think that they can successfully bring to voters in the midterm election. What are those two propositions? One, that pandemic policies based on science and data, those are the Democrats' words here in California, work and are popular with voters in blue states and in swing states. And the same thing applies to blue congressional districts or swing congressional districts. The other thing they believe worked here in California was identifying the Republican opposition as very close to, if not identical to former President Donald Trump. Both things were part and parcel of the way Democrats got energized and mobilized in this race in the closing 5 weeks and produced the landslide victory. It is in no way in doubt. Larry Elder, the top vote getter in the second question here in California, has already conceded defeat. He said, "I lost." He told his supporters to accept defeat graciously. So this thing is over, and it's over decisively. And what California Democrats are telling the rest of the country is what you saw play out in the last 5 weeks of this recall election, though for a while Governor Newsom looked to be in some political peril, might be a template for the midterm elections.
Since the way the governor handled the pandemic was what gave this attempt at recalling him enough fuel to get all the way to a ballot, does this victory then give him a mandate to handle the pandemic as he sees fit in California? If he wants mask mandates, he can go ahead. If he wants, any other restrictions, the people have spoken and they back him.
The short answer to your question, Anne-Marie, is absolutely yes. The governor has said over and over again what was on the ballot, in addition to other issues related to homelessness, the economy, cost of living, inflation, criminal justice reform, climate change. The biggest issue in the closing stages of this recall election were his pandemic policies, which his Republican critics here said were the most restrictive in the nation and, in their mind, ruinous. Well, now, Governor Newsom has a response from the voters of California, and it is decisively in favor of his policies. Are all of them universally embraced? No. But on balance, Californians said, we are glad you did what you did, made the decisions you did, and we want to back you in this moment when that question is right before all of us. So I talked to Governor Newsom about this on Sunday. I said, did you learn anything from this process? He said, look, I've been criticized. I've made mistakes. Every elected official who's had to make decisions in the heat of the pandemic has made mistakes of one kind or another. And all of us have been criticized and scrutinized. But Gavin Newsom now, unlike any other elected official in this country, has something no one else has, which is a verdict on those policies. And it was decisively in his favor.
So we had a lot of big-name Democrats come in, and there was a lot of focus on the pandemic and how it's being handled. But I wonder, for those who live in California, yes, the pandemic was an issue, and, perhaps they did not like the Trumpian alternative. But were there other issues that rank, quite high that they were also, voting on?
There were. And if you look at those who voted yes on recall, mostly Republicans, they identified the two most important issues to them here in California, the state of the economy and homelessness. But also on that list were things like Governor Newsom's decision during the height of the pandemic to release some inmates from the California penitentiary system. I talked to some voters here who were so angered by Newsom, they said, look, people who had been convicted of crimes in California were released from prison. They had more rights than small businesses, or in some cases, churchgoers in California, who had to live with all these restrictive lockdowns And Governor Newsom's side would say, well, they weren't that bad, but Californians, at least on the Republican side, viewed them as overly restrictive. But in addition to that, there are Californians on the Republican side who believe that wildfires here are not being aggravated so much by climate change, but by decisions related to forest management. And they also said droughts in California are a matter of overly aggressive environmental regulations as opposed to actual water shortages. So there are underlying issues completely unrelated to the pandemic that some recall supporters focused on. But in the end, every election oversimplifies. And if you're going to oversimplify this election, what the closing argument of the governor was, this is about what I did to fight the pandemic. Do you agree or disagree? And he's got a 2-to-1 margin. And I believe a lot of Democrats are going to look at that and draw conclusions from that 2-to-1 margin in favor of those policies.
So you mentioned Larry Elder did concede, but, you know, he also said, look, we lost the battle, but we're not going to lose the war. And then, like a good broadcaster, he said, stay tuned. You know that he already had mentioned, had raised the specter of voter fraud or irregularities or whatever throughout this whole campaign. Do you expect that this will be sort of the end of this conversation in terms of the recall election, or is there going to be pushback? Are people going to suggest that there were irregularities and that sort of thing, like we saw in the national election?
One thing's for certain, Anne-Marie, buries any notion that there was fraud or any kind of election mismanagement that in any way affected the outcome. You know what that is? A landslide, and that's what this was. So there's not going to be any serious effort or even non-serious effort to challenge the results of this election. So decisive, it makes no difference. And Larry Elder and former President Trump said, well, this election is probably suspect from the beginning. They never defined what those suspicions were or what potential fraud might look like or be, because there's no evidence of it here in California whatsoever. Are Republicans in general uncomfortable with mail-in balloting and everyone receiving a ballot through the mail, as opposed to the old process where you register in person and then you go and vote in person? Yes, they are. But that level of discomfort has nothing to do with actual fraud or breaking of the rules, none of which occurred in California in this election. So that issue, I think, is settled. Now, to your other question, is Larry Elder likely to run against Gavin Newsom when he's up for re-election next November? When he said stay tuned, I think that's exactly what he's implying. And he got into this race late in July, rose to the top of the Republican field, raised $10 million very rapidly, and got by far more votes than anyone else on that second question, who should replace Gavin Newsom. That very much means he could be the nominee for the Republican Party next year. But this recall election also sends a pretty strong signal that Larry Elder, who was defined by Gavin Newsom as sort of the face of the Republican recall, trailed him 2-to-1 and would have to take that margin of defeat into next year's gubernatorial election and find some way to close the distance.
Yeah, well, he got the opportunity to learn some hard lessons when it comes to his messaging. So I would be very curious to see what type of Larry Elder we see should he run again. Major, thank you very much.
You got it.